We are an inter-ethnic body, and we're present in all 5 boroughs of our city. We are here with activists, lawyers, students, in order to add our voices to those who in this city are still calling for an increase of responsibility, transparency, and accountability of the NYPD. We of the Islamic Leadership Council, we want to emphasize that this is not only a matter of the Muslim community. We see this particular problem of warrantless surveillance of the Muslim community with no concrete evidence of criminal activity as part of a larger problem that involves the NYPD policies that include stop and frisk. For the entire tenure of his leadership as the police commissioner of the city, Ray Kelly, as far back as the Marlin Commission in 1994, has consistently resisted, has consistently fought all attempts to bring in outside monitoring of the NYPD. And this type of attitude has led to stop and frisk, and it has led to the surveillance of our Muslim communities, institutions, and people. There is a statement in the report, it's a quote from myself, that says this report is critically important reading for all Americans concerned with freedom, justice, and equality in the 21st century here in America. And the reason why we said this is because when you get a chance to go through the report, you're going to see that this report features or highlights the voices of real people. We want to take this struggle out of just abstract discussion as Ray Kelly has been trying to keep it in. Oh, we're following this, we're following that. These policies, as you see here today, are affecting real human beings. And I have been a Muslim leader in this city long enough to remember clearly when the mosques, the Muslim religious institutions were treated on a par with churches, treated on par with synagogues. That is to say, we had a status known in the NYPD as sensitive locations. And that meant that the same protocols that were to be observed with other houses of worship were to be observed in Muslim houses of worship. But now, on this side of 9/11, we find that the sensitive locations that are mosques have been transformed by NYPD policy into hot spots. That's what they're called. They're called hot spots. In this very building, just before the Associated Press began to release its documents, Muslim leaders from across the city 2 years ago had gathered for the annual NYPD pre-Ramadan briefing. At that briefing, I posed 3 questions to Police Commissioner Ray Kelly. The first question that I posed to him was I asked him if he would clarify for these imams and Muslim leaders the matter that was still under discussion regarding the film The Third Jihad. Police Commissioner Kelly said the film The Third Jihad was just playing in the background in a training room. He obscured the truth. He did not tell us that he was in the film. He did not tell us that the film played for a year. He did not tell us that over 1,500 police officers had been exposed or had viewed that film. We then began to see, after the AP reports began to surface, that Police Commissioner Kelly was not being forthright with those of us who are Muslim leaders. He was not being honest. He would not stand in front of a group of Catholic priests or a group of Protestant pastors or a group of rabbis and purposely obscure the truth. The second question that I put to him concerned a suggestion that these people here, we have for years been proposing to Police Commissioner Kelly that he form an NYPD advisory body. When I posed that question to him, he said, and I quote, "It's hard to know who to put on such a body," he said. And that was a little puzzling for me as an answer, because personally, I know several imams who for decades have been working in the precinct level throughout this city in cooperation with the NYPD. I'm one of them. They know who we are. They know the kind of experience that we have at the table addressing concrete problems. And then the third and last question that I posed to him, I said that in the midst of your monitoring of the Muslim community, this meeting occurred right after the murder of Muslims in Norway by an extremist. And I pointed out to Commissioner Kelly in front of a couple of hundred witnesses that murderer in Norway had said very clearly and expressed admiration for people who are right here in New York City, Pamela Geller and people of that ilk. And so I asked Commissioner Kelly, you're watching the Muslims, are you watching the extremists right here in the city? And he never answered the question. He danced around the question and shut down the question. So we are here as part of an ongoing struggle for justice. We support our colleagues, we support our fellow leaders. We of the Majlis Shura have been systematically excluded from the meetings that have gone on in this building. We have sent letters to the mayor, letters to the police commissioner, and never received a single written response to our inquiries and our expression of willingness to meet with the police commissioner. So after we finish here today, we're going to take a copy of this report and we're going to attempt to deliver it personally to the police commissioner. He doesn't want to meet with us face to face, but maybe he'll accept a copy of this report. Thank you.
Champions, legislators working with us to pass the Community Safety Act, a package of legislation that will bring NYPD reform. I'd like to give a shout out to two city council members who are not here with us today, but here in spirit and have always been at our side calling for NYPD reform. City council members Jumani Williams and City Council member Brad Lander, co-sponsor of the NYPD Inspector General Act. And amongst those is our colleague who's here with us today, a champion for justice for all communities, Council Member Daniel Drum from Queens.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you, Claire, and thank you, Adele, for providing us with this report. This is really important evidence about the impact that the policies of the NYPD have on Muslim communities. Before being elected to the New York City Council, the issue of Muslim surveillance was an issue for me. Since having been elected, it has become an even more important issue. I represent a large Muslim community in Jackson Heights, Queens, and constantly people come to me with concerns about spying on our communities. And all Americans should be concerned about the spying on Muslim communities by the NYPD, because the spying on those communities could happen to any community.
That's right.
Now, when I had the opportunity to question Commissioner Kelly at a hearing in the City Council about the spying in Muslim communities, he claimed that it was done on geography. My follow-up question to him was then, if you do it for geography, based on geography, do you also have maps of the Irish communities? Do you have a map of all the Irish pubs in Sunnyside, right, all the Greek taverns in Astoria? That's right. And of course, he had never done any mapping on those communities. So I submit to you that this is targeting the rights and violating the rights of a large majority of our citizens. It's the right to assembly, it's the right to freedom of speech, and the right to freedom of religion. And that is why when Linda said we need the Community Act passed, the Community Safety Act passed, because that would provide and make sure that we are treated in courteous, professional, and respectful ways by the NYPD. It would require the NYPD to provide identification so that we would know who they are. And it would also provide for an Inspector General so that when we have issues like this, we can go to the Inspector General and tell them that the policing that they're doing now is bad policing. As the chair of the Immigration Committee and a member of the Progressive Caucus, I also know firsthand that if you want good policing, you need the trust of the community. The policing that's going on now, it encourages mistrust or distrust within Muslim communities. It is not good policing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
On the call for the Inspector General, many of us are wearing these buttons that say the NYPD is watching us, but who's watching the NYPD?
Right.
And is why we need an Inspector General, an independent oversight body to make sure that the NYPD is doing their job, and they're doing their job right and just. I'd like to now introduce to you Julia Christeller, who is a interfaith minister, a psychologist, someone who's worked very closely with our community and can talk about the psychological impact of surveillance on the Muslim American community. Thank you, Julia.
Hello, my name is Julia Christeller, Julia-Kristeller. I speak today, as Linda said, as an interfaith minister, as an educator, a counselor, a Christian, and also as a citizen and a mother. I share from my over 10 years of experience of working with Muslim women and girls, facilitating women's support groups and community outreach and creative projects and interfaith initiatives with and within the Muslim community. I've had many regular conversations with women, Muslim women of all ages, who share their joys of being in America, their joys of being Americans, but also share their fears of being harassed and having their appearance and their faith misunderstood on the streets of our city, in their children's schools, and often even feeling insecure on public transportation or seeking health care. My experience of those I've been privileged to work with is that they are women of deep and compassionate faith and heart, with love of family and commitment to community, to a more peaceful world, and to this country, to the best of what America has to offer. As we all do, they simply want to raise their children and live their lives in a safe and free environment, and to feel respected as the contributing citizens to our community that they are. As an interfaith minister and as a citizen, I find it unacceptable that in our country, founded on religious freedom and the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that Muslim women, children, and families and students who have lived here for many years, many decades, been born here in our city, or those who have recently arrived, sometimes escaping unsafe situations elsewhere, sometimes simply seeking a new life or an education in America, should have to worry about constant hidden and sometimes not so hidden police intelligence monitoring, or to see their children or their husbands harassed and treated like suspected criminals in their schools, businesses, communities, and especially in their houses of worship. This can have a debilitating psychological effect over time, particularly on children who may experience harassment in their schools and then come home to find their parents, who should be the people they can talk to about being safe, feeling also afraid in their communities and houses of worship and feeling intimidated by undercover police. This is also extremely counterproductive to creating the kinds of partnerships and trusts with the very police and agencies that may really rely on community support from families in dealing with any real problems or threats. It creates this heightened sense of vulnerability and stress within communities and among families, which impacts everyone's sense of mental, physical, and spiritual well-being. And it taints the sustaining and healing experience all people in this city should have a right to if they choose. The right to pray and worship and seek spiritual guidance from their faith and their leaders in privacy and in peace, not under the scrutiny of police cameras and undercover police spies or informants who enter their sanctuaries. I've also had the chance to work with young Muslim men and women, students, who share their passion for peace and devote themselves to special creative grassroots projects and events to reach out and build community among other young people of all faiths, ethnicities, and backgrounds. Young people who no longer feel safe on their own campuses. I've also had the privilege of coming to know many of the Muslim leaders and staff in community-based and citywide organizations, some of whom you see here today. People who are devoted to serving their community and also to serving the city as a whole, building new bridges of understanding and providing basic services to people of all faiths and backgrounds. I have had the deeply rewarding experience of working with a number of imams and Muslim leaders on interfaith worship and fellowship events involving Christians, Jews, Muslims, Sikhs, and Buddhists. I experienced all the Muslim community leaders that I have been in contact with and their organizations as exemplars of integrity and service, and interfaith outreach to all of our city that has been incredibly healing. An effort made many prominent New York leaders of all faiths and many of our city's most renowned seminaries have been engaged in as their partners since 9/11. Again, as a faith leader committed to the health and well-being of all communities, I find it unacceptable that police would use policies of mapping citywide surveillance and a system of infiltrating and informing on a whole population based solely on their religion, violating the basic civil liberties that we should prize in this country, and potentially intimidating, undermining families and communities and leaders striving to contribute to our city, to lead good lives as Americans and to grow as students here. We are here because we are a city of diverse people and faiths living together, each making a contribution, trying to help all of us live better, love better, and serve the common good. My belief is that all faiths are guided by the same spirit and by God's wisdom that manifests in many different forms. By targeting and spying on a whole people of faith in our communities, our agencies, our campuses, and houses of worship, we violate the sanctity of the rights and freedoms of all people of New York and undermine the spirit of progress and collaboration and community building that the faith leaders of this city have worked so hard to achieve. So I implore the NYPD and that all of us as a city take responsibility to see such practices and reevaluate more productive, nurturing, and less destructive ways of keeping all the people in the city safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. It's not just about the surveillance of the Muslim American community, it's about the discriminatory and abusive policies of the New York Police Department,
Absolutely.
which includes stop and frisk. And in the spirit of connecting the dots between communities, between struggles, and between issues, I'd like to introduce Steve Kohut from the Justice Committee, representing Communities United for Police Reform, a citywide coalition working to end stop and frisk and to reform the New York Police Department. And we have joined together with them to ensure that both our issues are brought and highlighted together as one community in one voice. Please welcome Steve Kohut.
How you doing? My name is Steve Kohut. That's Steve, S-T-E-V-E. Kohut is K-O-H-U-T. I'm an organizer with the Justice Committee and here representing Communities United for Police Reform. I myself am not part of the Muslim community, but I stand here in solidarity with my brothers and sisters. And I call them that because of what Sister just said right now about the discriminatory practices that we both suffer. I grew up on the Lower East Side, born and raised and still residing there. And I've been a victim of stop and frisk since I was like 12 years old. That's all I knew. I knew the cops come to you, they stop you, they search you illegally and unfairly and unjustly, and then they send you on your way if you're lucky. And that's a tactic that's prejudiced and racist. And it's the same thing as the surveillance on the Muslim community. That's something that is prejudiced on just because of what religion you are, you're going to be surveilled. That, for me, it falls under the prejudice and the racist category, and it's not something that should be done. One of the things that we do through the Justice Committee and part of a coalition called People's Justice is something called Cop Watch. And we receive a lot of pushback from the cops. They don't want to be watched while they're doing their jobs, even though they're public servants and it's within our rights.
Right.
We have the right to document police activity.
That's right.
As long as we do not obstruct, and we do not obstruct. But they have a problem with it. They don't want to be watched. They try to block our camera. They try to take it away. They put the flashlights in our camera so we can't see them. They don't want to be watched so bad, why are they watching the Muslim community so hard? What is it they're searching for, and why are they still doing it if it produces zero leads? It makes no sense. It's racist, it's prejudice, and it's something that needs to be stopped. Thank you.
Thank you.
The Muslim community has been very fortunate to have many friends and allies in solidarity, including Jews Against Islamophobia Coalition, which is a coalition of 3 Jewish American organizations in New York City that have taken on the issues of combating Islamophobia and reforming the New York Police Department. Please welcome John Moscow to speak on behalf of Jews Against Islamophobia Coalition.
Good afternoon. My name is John Moscow. That's Jon, Moscow, Moscow. I am speaking on behalf of the Jews Against Islamophobia Coalition, which consists of 3 organizations: Jewish Voice for Peace, Jews for Racial and Economic Justice, JFRIJ, and Jews Say No. We are here to express our solidarity with the Muslim American Civil Liberties Coalition and the members of the Muslim community, and to join our voices in endorsing the recommendations of this important report. And I hope that those of you who have the copies will in fact read each of those recommendations very carefully, because not only is this to present the problems that are happening, but the report also outlines specific actions which can and should be taken to ameliorate and end these practices. This report is truly chilling in 2 senses of the word. There is no question that the activities of the NYPD described in the report have a chilling effect on constitutionally protected rights of Muslims, including the rights of free speech, free association, and freedom of religion. It is also chilling to read the report because the effects of the NYPD activities, as people here have been describing them, have all the hallmarks associated with a police state. As in a police state, people become careful of what they say and to whom they say it. They become careful of whom they hang out with, what jokes they tell, what political opinions they express, where they travel. People hesitate to practice their religion and think twice about which mosque they attend. People hesitate to trust one another and hesitate to trust the police, even when they need their assistance, which of course makes them and the city less safe rather than more safe, as we're being told this policy is supposed to do.
Right.
Over every action of daily life hangs the knowledge that the police or their agents may be monitoring, recording, and interpreting or misinterpreting these actions. Because the surveillance is cloaked in secrecy, it is impossible to challenge on a day-to-day basis. And it may be difficult or dangerous for those affected to stand up and stand out in publicly criticizing it. Which makes it even more important for members of all communities to stand up and stand out in criticizing the police surveillance of the Muslim community and to call for full police accountability as called for in the recommendations. The authors of the report call on communities to hold community-wide discussions about surveillance in order to generate initiatives and mobilize constituents to respond to NYPD policies and to contain their negative impacts. We second this call, and we particularly urge Jewish congregations and community organizations to hold these discussions. Jewish history tells us clearly that this kind of surveillance is antithetical to a free society. It also tells us the critical need of effective communities to be joined by allies. As Jews and as New Yorkers, we say loudly and clearly, this is not only a Muslim problem, it is a problem for all of us. If silence implies assent, we will not be silent. Thank you.
We're almost over, got 4 speakers. If you're a community in New York City, in New York, and you have a civil rights issue, who do you call? Not the NYPD, you call the New York Civil Liberties Union. So it is my honor to introduce Amal Sinha, Suffolk County Director, speaking on behalf of Donna Lieberman today from the New York Civil Liberties Union. Welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Amol Sinha, that's Amolsinha, and I'm the director of the Suffolk County chapter of the New York Civil Liberties Union. For too long, the NYPD has been targeting individuals based on their race, skin color, political views, or religion. From stop and frisk to the surveillance of innocent Muslims, the NYPD has been targeting Americans as suspect, not because of what they've done, but because of who they are. The NYPD surveillance of innocent Muslim Americans falsely tells New Yorkers and the world that being Muslim is a sign of disloyalty and a proclivity towards violence. It brands all Muslims and their First Amendment activity as suspicious. Police spying on innocent people in their neighborhood cafes, bookstores, or mosques doesn't make us any safer and violates core constitutional principles. Religious and ethnic profiling was unconstitutional before 9/11, and it remains unconstitutional today. Investigations of any community which are not based upon indications of crime create fear and erode trust between police and community members, making us all less safe. Unlike surveillance of criminal activity, the NYPD program has no end in sight. When surveillance is done to detect a crime, it stops when the crime is stopped or when the danger has passed. But a surveillance program like the NYPD's has no end. It just hurts more and more people as it continues. The report being delivered today shows us that the NYPD spying program has impacted Muslim New Yorkers across the board, from students to advocates to community members and religious leaders. And it has chilled the First Amendment rights of innocent people from New York City to upstate New York to the eastern end of Long Island and beyond. The NYPD must end its unconstitutional practice of spying on innocent people and criminalizing religious identity. The NYCLU stands today with advocates from all around the state, demanding that Commissioner Kelly and the NYPD protect civil liberties and serve and protect all New Yorkers, regardless of race, ideology, or religious belief. Thank you.
Last but finally not least, I'd like to introduce Fahid Ahmed, Legal Policy Director at Daisy's Rising Up and Moving. Drum.
Good afternoon. My name is Fahad Ahmed, F-A-H-D, last name A-H-M-E-D. I work with an organization called Drum, Daisy's Rising Up and Moving. And we organize low-income South Asians for immigrant rights, workers' rights, and police accountability. Many of our members have been directly affected by these policies of the NYPD. And we clearly see that the NYPD is out of control. This is a police department that is absolutely out of control. Do we believe that it is right for the NYPD to spy on someone for operating a food pantry? Do we think it is all right for the NYPD to spy on an organization or an individual for demanding NYPD accountability? Do we think it's fine for the NYPD, in the words of one of their own informants, to quote, create and capture conversations or acts of extremism? This raises serious questions about the so-called cases that the NYPD generates. And we see this is a pervasive problem, that the NYPD operates on a presumption of guilty until proven innocent for all of our communities.
That's right.
Whether it's because you're a Muslim, whether it's because you're black and Latino and walking down the streets, or whether you're a community activist demanding NYPD accountability. And so we're here in support of this report and in support of the recommendations that the NYPD end its surveillance of Muslim communities and its biased policing of all other communities, that the NYPD expunge all the records that it has collected out of this illegal spying program, that the NYPD reach out to the community, as has been said earlier, in a genuine way and have real, frank conversations and accountability to the communities that they are supposed to serve, rather than abuse them. We also call upon the City Council to investigate the Intelligence Department of the NYPD and to support the passage of the Community Safety Act. We also call upon the state legislature and the state officials to institute independent oversight over the NYPD, to account for the budget of the NYPD, and hold them accountable. We are asking for the Attorney General and on the New York State level and on the federal level to conduct an investigation of the NYPD and the Department of Justice, which is not only authorized but is mandated to investigate in these cases. Lastly, because we cannot wait on these institutions, our communities will continue to organize. There are many directly affected people here, many of whom you can speak to, who have been targeted by the NYPD, but they're not here remaining quiet and remaining silent and staying afraid. They are organizing on a day-to-day basis to meet with their city council members, to meet with elected officials, to talk to the media, to protest, to organize. Because we understand our rights will exist only to the extent that we are willing to fight for them. So our communities will continue to speak out, continue to organize, our mosque will continue to speak out and demand NYPD accountability, and we demand that our elected officials, our allies, and our representatives stand in solidarity with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Fahad. We know that our justice doesn't land in the or is not in the hands of Commissioner Kelly, and we have invited Commissioner Kelly to a town hall meeting to hear directly from impacted communities, and he has refused our invitation. So we wanted to put that on the record. We also want you to know that we know that our justice is in the Constitution, in the law, and we're taking it to the courts, and we're taking it through the legislative process to pass Community Safety Act. Right now, Imam Talib Abdul Rashid, Maryam Saeed, student, and Suhaib will be walking into One Police Plaza to deliver this report to Commissioner Kelly. He hasn't come to our community, so our report and our stories are going to One Police Plaza. If you have any questions for any of our people here today, feel free to interview. I'd like to just give a shout out to Rabbi Michael Feinberg for being here always for us. My colleague and fellow activist David Ganaranza, I saw him here as well. And thank you to CPR and all the groups that are here today, CARE and everyone who joined us today. So feel free to interview folks at Imam Talib and